All right. Everybody can see that? All right. Hang on, let's see what we're doing over here. You coming to class or? Okay. All right. Well, we started, so. Okay. I guess. Hey, here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at wisdom. And let's just review just a tad. It's not an extensive review. We introduced last week. And remember, this is our hot. You got to get that little in your throat. Anyway, that's the Hebrew word for it. And when you go back into the Hebrew scriptures, what it can just mean skilled. Remember when I mentioned last week that God tells Moses to make sure the guy that's doing the tabernacle has hakmah, and that's what he has given him. So it just means the skilled, the person that can do that. But then it came to mean this expertise, not just in one area of life, but in all of life. And so that's what we're looking at when we think about wisdom. And then when we come to Sophia, which just sounds like that ought to be wisdom, and it is. It's the Greek word, and it doesn't have any other really definition. It's just wisdom. And so what we try to say is, okay, the simplest form, and Fred had a lot of different, he wrote out some different ideas of wisdom, and it kind of is covered in this simplicity, doing the best you can with what you got. That's really what wisdom is. It's trying to be as an expert as you can with whatever you have in a way to live life. And so that's what we tried to pull apart a little bit. But we're not just talking about any wisdom, right? We're talking about God's wisdom. And when we talk about God's wisdom, as opposed to what we believe with any other kind of wisdom, human wisdom, we're talking about a complete wisdom, a full wisdom, and all the expertise of expertise wisdom. So we're saying that God knows how to live life better than anybody else. And of course, we recognize the fullness of the wisdom of God in Jesus, because he is called the wisdom of God. And so when we went to the Proverbs last week, in Proverbs chapter 2, he kind of pulls apart what he's trying to talk about wisdom. And so when we recognize it's a gift from God, it comes from God, it starts with God. The beginning of all wisdom is the fear of God, or the awe of God, the respect of God. But you just don't think about God. You have to seek after this expertise that God is trying to give you. So it's not just, you're not just zapped with this stuff. But then as you do seek after it, you do gain it. Okay? And the Proverbs are filled with the idea that there are some people that have hakmah, and there are some people that don't. And so you do gain it, and it grows. And so it's the idea that we're never going to arrive at the full totality of what God has in wisdom, but we can gain it. And we definitely now don't just gain it so that we can be smarter or act wiser in our brains toward everybody else, but we actually want to use it. That's where the expertise comes in. It's a skilled way to live is what we're trying to look at. So that's kind of just the introduction. What I ask tonight, and everybody can join in here and answer this question. Where is wisdom specifically needed for you right now? All right. See if I can get this bigger. How do I get this bigger? How do I get my screen bigger? What did I do? Show the small. No, that's not it. Okay. Well, anyway. I'm still sharing? Oh, that's what I need to do. Thanks. There we go. All right. Where is somewhere that you would say you need wisdom right now? What's going on in our lives? Where do we need some wisdom? Heather, you're looking like something.
Oh, I was just thinking, just work-life balance, I guess. Just how do you handle growing a business in a pandemic with 3 children at home, trying to do school, just all of that, figuring out every single day what the priority needs to be today, because every day it seems different.
Okay. Getting the business going, you got the kids at home, you just need wisdom. How do you balance how do you get all that? It's good. It's good. Somebody else, where's the area of wisdom maybe needed right now for anybody? Somebody. Steve?
Yeah, I'd say all kinds of places, but one that particularly comes up is Heather mentioned having the kids, and man, that hits close to home too, because you you want your kids to do certain things and grow in certain ways, but you also know that it's got to be in God's timing, and they're just kids. And I need that wisdom to say, where do you push? Where do you back off? Where do you emphasize? What do you let them take the lead on? And it's difficult.
Okay. Hadn't got that figured out how to just raise kids. Stephen, oh, no, absolutely. That's a good one. That's a good one. How in the world? All right. Anybody else specific area right now? Especially as we're talking about this troubled time, pandemic. Anybody?
Well, with me, being all by myself, just wisdom to handle all the situations that come up when you're by yourself.
Yeah. I noticed that Facebook has been your friend when the waters want to start leaking, you cry out.
Yeah.
That was a good wise move. Help! Water issue. Okay, that's a good one. Yes. What do you do? What do you do when you're alone, and especially in a situation where it's tough right now to be. Any other specific areas of wisdom right now? Anybody else want to share? You have one? Anybody? Hmm. Okay. We could probably continue on that for quite a while and start thinking of a lot of different places that we specifically need wisdom. I know that as far as like at church, wow, figuring out exactly how to muddle through this and wade through all the different situations that are going there when church seemed to be so mapped out for us. The model seemed to be doing just fine, thank you very much, at least in how we were used to it. And all of a sudden now it's like, well, okay, that model's not quite there right now. Is that the model we need to continue with? Is there something that we need to do in a different way? Do we need to pursue different ideas? So wisdom is needed like constantly in that area as the leaders try to put all that together. But we could go on and on. Everybody has something that they're dealing with, the wisdom of how to deal with these different kinds of things. And so when we think about that, let me see if I can get to it. Hello there. Okay. Here's what we ask. Whatever that area is, have you asked God for that wisdom to deal with that? Is that one of the places that we think of when we start thinking, boy, I really need some answers here. I really need to figure this out. Is that where we kind of head? And do we even ask? Because what we looked at when James says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, we say what? And then he says, you need a perspective. This is going to be good in the end. And so if you're lacking that wisdom to be able to see that the trial is not for your damage, but actually for your growth, well, maybe you're lacking in wisdom. And so ask God. But it's not just in a trial. It's anytime we come up with anything. And that's where we're kind of starting. If this is of God, and we believe it is, and if it comes from God and it's a gift of God, James is taking us right where the Proverbs do. And he says, okay, then ask God. So tonight what we want to do is we want to kind of spend some time saying, well, exactly, then how do I ask God for wisdom? How do I ask God for wisdom? Is it just as simple as crying out, help? I mean, that's probably a way to cry out for wisdom. I just need help here, and that's not bad at all. But I think what we can see is when we go to the scriptures that people have always wondered, well, how do I ask God? Okay? What am I supposed to come to God with special words and formulas? And we go to Jesus and we go, well, maybe, well, I don't know. And we're all familiar with these things, but James doesn't leave us in the dark with this. Look what he says. He says, but ask in faith. What does he do? He says, ask God. If you're lacking in wisdom, ask God. He gives to everyone generously. He will give it to you, but ask in faith. Never doubting. The one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For the doubter, being double-minded and unstable in every way, does not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Or a good translation of that would be, you can't expect to get what you need. What do you need right now? Wisdom, if you're doubting that God can even give it to you. Right? And so he's not trying to paint a picture that God will never answer your prayers unless he's trying to say, how can we move into a state of receiving, a state of God? Okay, we're asking, but we're not doubting this. Why would we think we would get anything if we don't really think God can give it? You know? And so we're in that kind of situation. So James has kind of taken us to a really, and anybody that, I don't know, I wish I could see everybody at all at once, but if anybody sees anybody holding their hand up and has a question or a comment, just jump right in there. I can only see about 5 people at a time. I don't know. I've got to learn how to get more people on here. But what we're trying to do is say, okay, it's not just a matter of yelling for help. You know, we all get into a desperation mode somewhere, sometime. Okay? And it's not that God won't hear our help and come and help us. Okay? As a matter of fact, Proverbs are very clear about that, as well as the Psalms, that God does hear the prayers of those that are weak, those that need help. Those are those kind of things. But what I think James is taking us into is a deeper understanding of what we can gain from God if we approach him in the way that James is talking about, in faith, not doubting. Right? So what does it make you think of when you think of, and you just turn your mic on and start answering, you don't have to raise your hand, but what does it make you think of when he says, okay, doubting is like a wave of the sea. It's driven and tossed by the wind. So that's kind of what the doubter, he says, is unstable. So what is this picture that James is trying to paint for us about this person that doesn't come to this with the kind of trust that he thinks we might could use talking? So what do you think? What's that picture look like to you? What's he trying to say?
Well, after looking at all the pictures of the hurricane this week,
Yeah.
it's devastation. I mean, there was just so much wreckage.
Okay. The wave just gets tossed by the wind.
Unstable. My goodness.
That's pretty unstable. All right. You just get tossed around in the wind, and it ends up in destruction. All right. Good. That's a good thought.
I kind of
Yeah.
see it as like looking for wisdom at a smorgasbord. Well, I'll ask God, and I'll ask this, and maybe I'll ask the tea leaves, and I'll, I'll look for signs. And
Okay.
so God is one thing among many, and why would I favor that solution over the others? Especially if it is something as, maybe, I'm sorry, I don't have my words. As something as illogical as count it all joy when you encounter trials.
Okay. If you couldn't hear Susan real well, that everybody could hear her, she was talking about that it's like if you're coming like this, like he says, you're double-minded, or as she said, you begin to add all kinds. Well, he's just one of the smorgasbord. Here's God, here's the tea leaves, here's this, here's that, and so, well, what? Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, whatever ends up making sense to me is the one I'll choose, instead of really trusting in God. Anybody else? What does that picture bring to you? Anybody? It's good.
To me, it kind of sounds like somebody who maybe it's an emotional thing or whatever, but they're up, they're down, they're left, they're right. Today they think, oh man, yeah, God's given me so much wisdom, I can do anything. And then the very next day, you eat something, then you get a stomach ache and you think, oh no, God has abandoned me. And the next thing you don't recognize what God has given you. You're constantly going back and forth.
Okay. All right. Good. That back and forth, like, yeah, God's with me. Yeah, he's not. Oh yeah, he's helped me. Yeah, he hasn't. Oh, he's given me wisdom. No, he really hadn't. Good. Okay. Any other thoughts, anybody? That's good. Well, what we're trying to do is say, okay, how do I ask, huh?
That was not a good way.
That was not a good wait time, Susan said. Anybody else? Okay. A little bit better wait time. So we've got, what we're trying to do is say, okay, how do I step into this faith? How do I, because all of us here want to go to God and ask him for wisdom because we know we need it. Okay? And at different times we can be even very, we notice that I specifically need it right here. I don't have a handle on this kind of thing. Some of the things that we mentioned earlier. How in the world do you balance work and trying to start a business and all that? How in the world do you really guide your kids in a way that they can grab hold of everything they need, and at the same time you kind of help them along or protect them or that kind of thing? So those are some of the ones that were mentioned. So how can we step into this and believing that God will really do that? Well, let's go back to Jesus, because it's really something, here in Luke chapter 11, we know the first of this pretty well. And we might know this part pretty well too. But the disciples come to him after he had been praying. And remember, they say, will you teach us to pray like John the Baptist taught his disciples? And Jesus basically will paraphrase, but he says, praying's no big deal, guys. All right? And he just gives them a little bitty list of things. And in Luke, it's very condensed. The older versions, a lot of translations will throw in everything that Matthew has, but Luke doesn't have all that. In the oldest, he just says, say, our Father in heaven, kingdom come, it's just like he's saying, you put these things out here, daily bread, forgive us our sins, and don't lead us into trials. So at the beginning of this, he is saying, okay, just start praying. Know who you're praying to, know that you're praying his will come, the kingdom. Know that you're in need of him for the daily things of life and for the relational reality of forgiveness. Just know those things and go to him. But then he comes to this parable. Right? That's what we're looking at, because we want to know about asking. And it's really something the disciples did not come to him and say, how do we ask God for stuff? They said, will you teach us how to pray? And he said, praying is no big deal. What's a big deal is asking. It's learning about this. That's the big deal, because he tells the parable about it. Suppose one of you has a friend and you go to him at midnight and say to him, friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread, for a friend of mine has arrived and I have nothing to set before him. And he answers from within, do not bother me. The door has already been locked. My children are in bed. I cannot get up, give you anything. I tell you, Jesus is now talking. He says, this guy said that. I tell you, even though he will not get up and give you, all right, and even though he will not get up and give you anything because he is his friend, at least because of his persistence, he will get up and give him whatever he needs. Right? So Jesus has just painted this parable, something that they could be very familiar with. I think my grandma, no matter what time, my mom's mom, no matter what time we got to her house, the first thing she said was, you want anything to eat? And usually I said, sure. And so it didn't matter what time. Well, in the Eastern world, it was more important than just saying, hey, you want something to eat. It was the expression of hospitality and all these kind of things. And so Jesus is saying, you've got a big need here. In that culture, that is quite an embarrassment. It's all these kind of things. So you run next door, and he says, it answers from within. The idea is, what would you expect if you go over there in the middle of the night? Right? You would expect somebody to say, not now. Right? But his point is, he's going to do it anyway. Why? Okay. Well, the word here that the New Revised Standard uses is persistence. It's really a pretty bad translation. I tried to find one, but they're all kind of in that line. It's the word shameless. You are willing to humble yourself and come here and say, I goofed. I messed up. I don't know how to handle this. I need you to help me. Shamelessness. Or it could even be that idea of boldness. So boldness and shameless, but it's those two ideas are coming together. So Jesus is trying to teach us something here. You would expect this guy to say what he does say, but you wouldn't expect him to give it to you. But Jesus says, but I'm telling you, there's something in it that says, yes, I will. So we're kind of trying to learn to ask. So he goes on to say, ask, it'll be given to you. Search, and you will find. Knock, the door will be open. We're used to seek. Okay? Seek, and you will find. Knock, the door will be open. Remember, these are present tense verbs that we sometimes neglect. And it's not ask and then see what happens. It is keep asking, keep searching, keep knocking, keep knocking. Okay? And so for everyone who asks you and keeps asking, you will get it. Everyone who searches and keeps searching, you will. Everyone who knocks, it will be open. And then he goes on to say, do you believe this? Do you get this? Is there anyone among you who, if a child asks for a fish, will give a snake instead of a fish? Or if the child asks for an egg, will give a scorpion? That excludes those tricky grandpas. Okay? No. What's the point? You're not trying to do something to your kids that are going to harm them. If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Heavenly Father give the Holy Spirit to those who asking? And it's once again, who keep on asking. And of course, what did we just introduced it last week, but we recognize that God's presence with the Holy Spirit is his wisdom with us. And so in a sense, Jesus is saying, do you want to gain the things of God? Ask. But why would God give it to me? We can begin to go down the umpteen list of reasons and excuses why God would never really give it to me. But I'm telling you, because of your shamelessness, because of your boldness to go in and ask, you get it. That's what James said, right? That's what we're trying to look at. We'll keep going here, because he knows that asking and knocking and seeking, well, you can lose heart in that. Okay? And so before we read this, and you know what's coming, you've read this parable before, but what might be some reasons when we're asking for wisdom that we begin to lose heart and we kind of begin to say, I don't know if I'll ask again. I don't know if I'll seek anymore. I don't know if I'm going to knock this time. What are some reasons or excuses, if we want to call them that, but what are some reasons that might cause us to lose heart? Anybody?
I think maybe when the ask is pure, when the ask is for something like, let this baby live, or I mean things that are like good and pure, or even selfless, not even asks for yourself, but asks for other people. And then when you don't get that, it seems confusing. Okay. Because it wasn't, because it was a good ask.
Okay, yeah. Okay. And James hit on a very good point, isn't it? We've said, well, if God doesn't seem to want to answer that in this way, and it seems to me like this is in his will, this is God, you know everything, this is everything that you know about asking. If he doesn't want to ask it that way, where are we with this? Where are we with this? And so you can kind of lose heart in that. Anybody else? It's good.
Does it go back to, if this doesn't look the way we think it ought to look, like count it all joy?
Yeah, okay.
Just not our wisdom.
All
And
right.
it seems so wrong.
Okay. We go back and we ask and then he comes back and says, well, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. Well, thank you very much. That's not exactly what I was wanting. I was wanting something else. So we have a hard time figuring out, well, wait a minute. How is God's wisdom in that? And of course, that's where we're going in this, huh?
Yeah, I don't need any more pride.
Yeah, what? No,
Get wisdom, get out.
that's what we're talking about. Russell, it looks like are you thinking about saying something? Can you unmute?
Finally got unmuted.
There you go. What you
Yeah,
got?
and I'm going to just keep mine to wisdom. You've asked, and you're not any smarter today than you were yesterday.
Okay.
But we had a great example. Inadvertently, I didn't know anything about Judy's plumbing problem, but if she asked for help, then that was very wise.
Mm-hmm.
And if she got an answer that solved her problem, that was even wiser. And she still may not be a plumber. I like that. I can't hawk up like you can. Hawk 'em. But where it said practical knowledge. Heather Byers and Rebecca Lewis have never come to me and asked for design help. And I hope they never do.
Okay.
They know better. That's not what I do.
Okay.
But I do every once in a while have some ideas.
We'll
Neither
ask you
does
for
anybody.
that help.
Yes, ma'am. But nobody asks me for car help. They go to Bob Doolahary sometimes.
Okay.
So when you pray for wisdom, you may not get the skill set to solve the problem, but somebody else may have it.
Ooh.
But what this verse says is don't get tired of asking.
Good.
Because this man did not have food.
Yeah.
He went next door to his neighbor.
Right.
Who had, even though he was going to be the one that served it, he didn't have it.
Right.
Hopefully he does learn to have it, like the prepared virgins and the oil and stuff. But wisdom, sometimes you may never have that skill, but to know when to ask and keep asking. And then who to listen to, because you will get different answers.
Okay.
Hope that
So
makes
it's almost
sense.
a discernment. It's a discernment as much as it is a wisdom.
Yeah, we might. I like that, Russell. In Jane talking about, we lose heart because when we ask, we think it has to go the way that we're asking. And what Russell was, well, if I heard you right, Russell, what you were saying is, when I ask for wisdom, I think I'm going to be the one that can figure all this out and get it done. But it might be the wisdom is I need to ask someone else for that. Or the wisdom is to know the person to ask. Or the wisdom comes in a way that doesn't bring me the actual skill set that I thought I was asking for. And so we lose heart. Well, all we're doing is saying, is looking at here, is that Jesus recognizes we can lose heart. And I find that very comforting, personally. Because we have a tendency to think that, man, I've got to be this certain kind of person. I got to be this certain kind of way, or I'm never going to gain whatever God has for me and so forth. But he clearly says here, I'm telling you this parable so that you can hang in there. He knows, even though he said praying's pretty easy, asking is not. Asking is not. And we all know how difficult it is. I don't know how many people we'll find out weeks later that they went through some terrible situation. And I'll just say, I don't know if anyone knew about it. No, I didn't ask. I didn't ask for help. No. And they went through it all by themselves. And asking is hard, but asking is powerful. And that's what we move to here. That's why he wants to. So let's go to the parable. You know, in a certain city there was a judge, neither feared God or respected people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, grant me justice against my opponent. For a while while the judge refused, but later he said to himself, though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because the widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice so that she may not wear me out continually coming. And so the whole point of this parable is God gets really upset with us, and finally we wear him out, and he says, no, that's not the point. Please don't think it is. All right. The point of the parable is persistence. He's trying to tell him, don't lose heart. The Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge said. Will not God grant justice to his chosen ones and cry out day and night? Will he delay in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith? Can you trust and keep trusting and not give up? Okay? And so it goes to this big question. Who do we think God is? When we go to ask God something, who do we think he is? Is he the unjust judge who we're trying to wear down to get our way and all these kind of things? Or is he the one who cares? And so from these two parables, when we start thinking about asking for wisdom, okay, because of who he is, keep asking God with boldness, trusting him to give what is needed. That's what we're trying to do when we come to ask for wisdom, okay? We just keep asking. We keep asking with boldness, trusting him to give what is needed. And that kind of falls into what Russell said. It falls into Anna Jane, the discernment. It falls into what Susan said about, wait a minute, this doesn't look like I thought it was going to look, or how do I reevaluate this? We don't ever give up because we know who he is. No. And so when Jesus says, you go to him as the Father, or you can go to him, the one who cares, will he not come? Right? And so this is really at really not just asking for wisdom, but we're specifically talking about that, is that especially in this area of wisdom, you know, we can have the idea that maybe, at least I had this for a long time, that really God is wanting me to live the best life I can live and show him what I got. But what we're seeing is God is wanting you to have his expertise in living this life and trusting that he will give that to you. And he will give you everything you need in order to live that life in an expertise way. Okay? He will give you what you need to figure out how to balance, you know, life, how to do these things. And so that's where we're trying to fall down on and say, okay, I got to keep asking with boldness. Why? Because of who he is. And so therefore I keep trusting he is going to give me what I need, especially in this area that we're talking about wisdom. Any thoughts, questions, ideas on that? Anna Jane and I are really good at just clearing this totally up with no questions, no comments. Chris gets all kinds of questions. I don't know what the deal is there. Anybody? Thoughts? Okay, let's go to the best example that we know of. Everybody thought of this a long time ago. Okay. Who in the Bible gets the A mark for asking for wisdom? That's right, Solomon. All right. So here, and I put First Chronicles 3 and Kings together, and it's Solomon loved the Lord, okay? Walking in the statute of his father David. Only or we could say, thing was though, he sacrificed and offered incense at the high places. Okay? David, of course, had taken the ark. It's supposed to be in the tabernacle, all this kind of stuff. They left the tabernacle anyway. King went to Gibeon, sacrificed there. But that was the principal high place. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, ask what I should give you. And Solomon said, you have shown great and steadfast love to your servant, my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness and righteousness and uprightness of heart toward you. And you have kept him for him this great and steadfast love, and have given him a son to sit on his throne today. Now, he hasn't asked for anything. So what do you think in this example here? What is Solomon, God, did you know this? He's not telling God anything that God doesn't know. But it seems like a very key thing to see. God says, ask whatever I should give you. And he didn't ask for a long time. No, God's already asleep by the time he gets to this sentence, you know? No. What is he doing? Why do you think he's saying these things that God already knows? What is he trying to establish here? You think? Any ideas?
Maybe he doesn't want to sound selfish.
You might not want to sound selfish. Okay. What else? Other ideas?
But I mean, there's this awe of God's asking me for something. I mean, God's asking for my opinion. Like,
Okay.
it's almost like a humble response. Oh, okay, you're really great. That's the only reason I'm going to answer this, because you're being super, super nice here. But I know how awesome you are, and I don't want to step on toes.
Okay. Good. Yeah. I'm really come to you. Really? You just am I dreaming right? Is this a fairy tale? What's going on? Okay. So you're the God, but he highlights a lot of things. Well said, Stephen. He's trying to sort through. Wait a minute. How did I get to this? And then finally, what's he say at the end? Oh yeah, I'm David's son. Have you ever had that wake up? Oh yeah, I can ask for whatever I want. You know. And of course, I think that's what we tried to establish in our emotions class for sure, but also just as we talked a little bit, that when Jesus comes up out of the water and he said, "This is my beloved son," that is where he lives now. And that is where we're trying to live. We are his beloved child. And so when we think about going to ask God, it's like that aha moment. It's like, I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ. I have the righteousness of the King. I'm actual royalty. I actually can ask God because of all this. You know, it's kind of like that aha. And so the way Stephen presented was really, really good. What is going on here? And keep thinking about it, but let's go on here. And now, oh Lord, my God, and he uses Yahweh. Anytime you see it all capitalized, then we're moving into this name that nobody is even supposed to say. And I think it's very significant that the Chronicles and the Kings have him actually say this in this way. You're not just a God. And he says two things. You are, I am. I am only goes with Moses. No, you are my God. I am my God. You have made your servant king in place of Father David. You have done this. And although I am only a little child, I do not know how to go out and come in. And your servant is in the midst of people whom you have chosen. You made me king. You've chosen these people. They're great people. They're so numerous you can't even number or count them. Give your servant, who identifies himself. Wait a minute. I thought you were the king. Okay. No. Wait a minute. No, your servant. Okay. Therefore, in an understanding mind to govern your people, able to discern between good and evil, for who can govern this, your great people? Okay. So in this, and then this is the king saying understanding mind, and it's not our ha. It's not that. It is more of what Anna Jane said. I'm going to need a lot of discernment to figure this one out. But God says, okay, because this was your heart, okay, and you have not asked for possessions, wealth, honor, or life of those who hate you, or have not even asked for long life yourself, but have asked for, evidently God heard it in a different way than the Kings and the Chronicles wrote him saying it. He asked for discernment, and God says, you're going to get expertise. You're going to get hot. Okay? And so if you want to think of it this way, God ups the ante. He says, you've just asked, but I'm giving you something far beyond even just that understanding of what's going on around you. You are going to be able to live an expert life. Okay? And I'm going to give you things to know that nobody else can. And he moves into that kenosis in the Greek, but it's that idea. I'm going to give you experiences of knowing that are far beyond what you're thinking or asking you, that you may rule my people over whom I have made you king. Wisdom and knowledge are granted to you. It repeats it. It says, I'm going to give it to you. It's granted to you. And this is a key thing for Solomon to remember, that maybe somewhere along the way, once you get this wisdom and this power and this money and this glory, you kind of forget where it came from. But it would have been good for him to go back and remember his dream. I will also give you riches, possessions, and honor, such as none of the kings had had before you, and none will ever have it like you. So Solomon came from the high place, Gibeon, to the tent, and he reigned over Israel. What we want to do is just grab hold real quickly of seeing Solomon in this host setting, and ask ourselves if I can move into that deeper spot of this asking, because we all pray. We all pray very, very fervently, in some way, somehow. And what we're trying to move into is this greater, and I put it down because I'm a preacher and you have to do all the same letter. But I think that what is happening is Solomon comes from this place of relationship, okay, before he goes to this place of request. And then he goes to the reason, the what and why, and the reasoning with God on all of this as he asked, and I've noticed in my prayer life that I can understand coming from the relationship, but that's not how it started in my prayer life. I pray because you're supposed to pray, and so it kind of comes from you're supposed to pray, so you better pray. But Solomon seems to be coming from this place that says, I love you, and you are my God. You are Yahweh, but you are my God. And so he has this unbelievable relationship, and somehow he is able to then see God in his life, and how he's working and what he's doing. And we can say, well, this is a miraculous time of a dream, but we already know that God has promised if we'll ask for wisdom, he's going to give it to us. And so Solomon is in this place of, okay, before I'm requesting, but it's out of this relationship. And so then when it goes into this place, well, what is the relationship? It's a humble standing before God. You have made me king, but I'm really just a child, and I'm really only a servant, your servant. And what God says is, because your heart was like this, because of your love for me, because of what you're saying about all of this, and we talked about that earlier. What does that mean? He was saying, wait a minute, I'm the king, but wait a minute, I'm just a child. And he doesn't mean I'm just a little kid. He means in being able to do this task that is now set before me, I'm just like a kid, And so he comes to that humble, but then he gets very specific about what he wants and why he wants it. And I think that maybe in the people that I talk to in my own life, that sometimes we don't dive into these areas. We just pray, and whatever that means. Okay? We just kind of pray. But so if we can get to where Solomon did, we're moving into what James is talking about, and we're not going to be double-minded. We have this relationship, so we come with these requests, but we reason with God in this. Okay? And we begin to reveal our heart, if you will, to God. Okay? Thoughts, ideas, questions. What are you seeing here? Anything different? Any ideas? Anything that helps? Anybody?
I'm troubled.
You're troubled. What is it?
Wow. So I'm working hard to understand conditional love, but now here we have conditional, like, granting of requests. You don't say this to everyone, but that's like unconditional love and conditional granting. Because you did this, then I'm going to give you, like, rewarded for being good, and yet it's unconditional love.
Okay.
That was troubling.
Okay. Yeah. Susan just said that it's kind of troubling to her because she's running into this, wait a minute, unconditional love, but we see God saying, because the condition, because you did this way, now all this is going to happen. Oh, that's good. That's interesting. Yes.
I find it
Steve.
interesting along the same lines. How many times do you hear what was the list of things that he could have asked for that he didn't, right? It was like riches or long life or honor or something. And how many times do we hear about people that suddenly become rich and they become miserable, or they live their long life, but their life is just a burden to them, right?
Mm.
It's only if you don't have wisdom, we think we want all these other things because they can be really cool, but without the wisdom and living with God, all of that can be actually more of a curse than a blessing at times. And maybe God's saying, I'm going to give you all this stuff too, because you asked for wisdom first. I know you'll be able to handle it. It's almost like maybe he's ready and willing to give Solomon great things, but Solomon's request for wisdom is showing God, hey, yeah, he's ready to handle all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just
interesting. Yeah. It has guesses to it, doesn't it? I mean, we're not emphatically saying here, okay, this is, but we're trying to observe how Solomon moved into, which is one of the powerful examples of asking for wisdom that James obviously knew. And when you go back and you sort through this, what we're trying to say is that there seems to be more than the simplistic of, I need to get what I want, I better ask God for it. That somehow prayer, somehow asking is taking us into a deeper connection with God, a humble standing before God, and yet to be specific, if we were, I think one of the things that over time has been, one of those great challenges is how do you reason through with God on something? Solomon kind of does that as a good example of it, but to say, God, here's where I am on this, and here's what you're asking me to do, and I don't have, so here's what I really need in order to carry out what you want me to do. And I'm just trying to say, listen to all the things that Solomon is thinking about in this particular moment and in this particular dream. He's not thinking about himself. And that's not to say that he lives his life that way on a continued basis. But in this particular moment, he is saying, what do you have? What do I need from you that you have that I don't have in order to do what you want me to do? And it seems like to me that's just a little bit deeper way to come at it. If we go back to our specifics, and I think that Heather is right there with that. You mind if I use you as an example, Heather? Okay. So we say Heather is, if Heather into Solomon, she's saying, in order for this to bring about, we'll paraphrase, in order for this to bring about the most glory to you, God, I'm going to have to get all of this sorted out. All right. Otherwise, I'm going to go crazy and a wild woman, and who knows what I'll do. All right. And so therefore, I'm coming together, not just so I can get a business started and the kids will be okay and not cry and those different kinds of things, but I'm coming together to bring this up to you, God, and lift this up to you in some way. And so what we're talking about in this class is seeing if we can figure out a way to move ourselves into this more, seeing ourselves, are we in that order of relationship and wrestling with the request, with understanding the relationship, and then reasoning with God on what this is going to look like, And I like what Susan said. We're never cut and dry. We're never black and white when we're talking about God. It's never, that's why God's God and we're us. Is that he is always, he's always ideas and beyond us. And, here's Solomon asking for a simple thing and boom, God goes, hey, you're getting it all. And that's like Stephen said, well, wow. Is he ready for that? Okay, God thought he was and so forth. Now it goes back to James and we kind of remember what James said. He doesn't just give it to us, he gives it to us abundantly. We've got a generous God here. So if we can get into that, to back where we talked about in that boldness with him, and so what we're trying to establish is that we're going back to what James said. If you're lacking wisdom, ask what? He gives generously, ungrudgingly. Okay? He's not trying to hold anything back from us that we need. It will be given to you. So ask in trust, faith. Don't doubt this. Okay? Don't be like the wave of the sea that's driven and tossed by the wind. I'm going to go over here and go over here. No, wait, maybe God won't. I haven't been good enough this week. Da, 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 da. You just keep going back through all these different kinds of things. I'm in a relationship with God, and I can sort through all of that with him. I can bring everything to him. I don't have to be double-minded, you know? Like, have you ever prayed, like, acting like God didn't know about something, so you didn't really want to tell him about it? No, or you tried to hide it, or you tried to talk about it in a different way, you know? No, just jump in there, okay? And this person that is just going back and forth, how would you ever expect to get anything from God? You know? And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to move to this idea that we go back and ask where we started. Where is wisdom specifically needed for you right now? So my I don't know if it's a challenge or the homework or whatever you want to call it, but think about where you specifically need it, and think about the way that you've been asking for it. Think about the angles you've been coming at it with God, and then think about those parables that God told us, and say, am I not asking very specifically this right now because I've just kind of lost heart? You know, as Anna Jane said earlier, you know, wow, I don't know if I know even how to ask, because I thought I asked exactly the way I was supposed to ask, and man, that is not what happened. You know, and so am I losing heart? Can I hear what Jesus is saying? You don't need to lose heart, because you got a God that is going to come through. You know? So now when we look at Solomon, we can say, okay, where do I need wisdom right now? Meaning, where do I feel like a kid right now, a child? I don't know what to do. And God is really wanting me to continue to do this. If we could use Stephen knows that God is asking to be a dad to these kids. How? So now we're just saying, okay, how do we go back maybe and sort through with the relationship, and maybe move into that idea of wisdom that James is presenting to us. Closing thoughts, ideas, questions? Famous quotes. Yeah. Fred, are we going to make it? What are you thinking?
Bonnie had her hand up.
Oh,
a long
Bonnie,
time ago.
I missed it. Where are you, Bonnie?
I'm
Yes.
here.
Okay.
My
I missed your hand.
It's already after 8:30, and I'll save it till next week. Okay.
Are you sure? Okay.
Okay, I don't understand why Solomon chose to have 1,000 wives and to build many of them places of worship for their gods. I don't understand that.
That. You and everybody else that's read it, I believe, is yeah.
Thank you, Judy.
Yes.
I don't know where you're going with this next, but I was, while you were going through and talking about this, I was reading the middle verses of chapter 9 of Proverbs.
Okay.
And I was remembering what Russell said last week about asking for wisdom and either granting it.
Yeah.
It's not an event, it's a continuum, you know. It's something you're always needing and always do.
Mm-hmm.
Those middle verses in Proverbs seem to indicate a situation where my idea is that I like to either think I'm wise, or that event I made a wise choice, or I didn't. But
Right.
I think the real situation is that I'm always like the doubting part. I'm a scoffer. That's nothing. Or I'm wise. I accept it. But I think I battle back and forth in that.
Okay.
And so I think what I'm saying is those middle verses in the 9th chapter says, hey, you don't ever reprove a scoffer. So if you have a relationship with someone that's a scoffer,
Mm-hmm.
don't waste your time in reproving them, because they'll just hate you for it.
Right.
And same idea. But if you give instruction, your relationship is something positive to a wise man, he'll love you for it, and he'll just be wiser. So it seems like it's always playing wisdom, getting wisdom from God, or what I need is always this thing going on within me that lets me make those determinations when I'm doing. Not that I'm not sometimes going to be a scoffer, and not sometimes I'm going to be working with a scoffer.
Right.
But I've got to be able to discern. Like Anna Jane said, I got to be able to discern that and use that day to day to day.
Yeah.
And everything's not an event or a decision.
Right.
It's a wisdom. It's a continuum.
Good. Good. And that's a really good point, Fred. That we're not trying to break it down to one dream like Solomon had, or that's where you get it. Like Bonnie brought up to us, we can see a lot of places he didn't use much wisdom, right? And so what specifically was asked was, give me the wisdom to rule your people, and he brought more peace to the country than they'd ever had before.
Some of it by marrying wives.
Huh?
Some of it by marrying wives.
One of the ways that he continued to do that was he would, and even before he receives this dream, remember what it said? He had just done that. He had just married a woman from another country to bond those countries together. So before he ever asked for that wisdom, he'd already started down that path of doing that. So it's like Bonnie said, wow, okay? It would seem like, but for the country, as Fred just said, that was an extremely wise thing to do. It brought him down extremely, into all kinds of stuff. So it's complex, but we need it on an ongoing.
The last part of that scoffer wisdom thing, it says, wisdom is for the wise person is for yourself. In other words, Solomon got that wisdom and he was doing that thing for himself. But his scoffer part, which was probably marrying the many wives and doing the things he did, that was to his own ruin. So that's what it says there in Proverbs on those two things.
Yeah.
The scoffing part, when I scoff, that's to my own ruin. When I'm wise, that's for the benefit of myself spiritually.
Okay. We're gonna move. We're gonna get to those. So hang on to those. You've already kind of held that, and that's really good. And what we want to do is say, okay, I'm really praying for this, but I think it was Anna Jane that said, well, how in the world do I move to discernment? And that's what we want to talk about next week is, okay, how does God reveal this to me? How do I gain this wisdom? It doesn't seem like you're just zapped with it, And so how do you begin to discern what God is trying to give you in this wisdom? To live a what? An expertise life. To live in a better way, to take what we have and use it in the best way we can to live the best life that we can. And so that's where we want to go next week. Okay, how can I begin to recognize God's wisdom when I've prayed for it? Because if I come out of a prayer not doubting, then I'm immediately looking for wisdom. I'm seeking because I know that God is going to give it to me. Okay? And in Solomon's case, God directly said, we don't have to hear God to trust his promise of what he just said in James. I will give it to you generously. So now we start going and counting the treasure of where in the world is this, where's this, but how do we do that? Because so many times we're back to what we talked about, we lose heart because we didn't see the wisdom. Well, wait a minute. We really believe that's what we prayed for. So we want to say, okay, maybe we're missing something on how we're evaluating or how we believe God reveals this to us. And maybe we can grab hold of that a little bit next week. Any thoughts? Any other ideas? Thank you so much for everybody being here. Hey, I forgot to tell you this. This is recorded. So if everybody's okay with that, is everybody okay with that, that we post it? Because I forgot to ask last week, I didn't post mine. If you're not okay, don't raise your hand. Uh-oh. Okay. Or did I say that wrong? If you're okay that it's posted, please raise your hand. Are you okay that we put it out on YouTube? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we can put it out. If some of it will be edited, maybe comments here. No, I'm just kidding. We'll get the thing out there. Any other thoughts, ideas, comments? Thank you so much. I hope that we can continue to plow down this road and try to grab hold of God's wisdom. That's what we're looking for. Co-Lars, have a safe trip.